Bitter Trail, Wyoming Territory, 1889. The last train had barely vanished when Mara Lane's knees buckled beneath her, her breath shaking like something torn loose inside her chest. She held a broken shard of mirror against her ribs, as if that tiny piece of glass was the only thing keeping her upright. Men nearby watched her without stepping closer, like she wasn't a person, just the remains of one. Her hand stayed pressed over the burned half of her face. Nothing could hide how recently someone had tried to erase her. And the worst part? She still wasn't sure if she wanted to keep living past tonight. Before we continue, if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. The wooden bench bit into the back of her legs every time she shifted. Still, she stayed there, hunched forward, arms wrapped tight around herself. Her breath trembled in thin, breaking streams. Each inhale burned her throat. 2 days without food, even longer without sleep. Her fingers tightened around the mirror shard until the edge cut skin. She welcomed the sting because it proved she wasn't numb, not completely. A man behind her snorted. "Look at that. Guess Kansas finally threw her out." Laughter, boots scuffing, a bottle clinking. Mara didn't look up. She'd learned months ago that raising her eyes only gave them permission to say worse things. Her heart fluttered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every sound felt like a threat. The slam of a door, a mule crying in the distance, the low hum of men waiting to watch her fall apart. Her stomach tightened. Don't faint. Not here. Not in front of them. She pressed her palm harder to her burned cheek. It throbbed, sharp, then dull, like flames still lived beneath her skin, and then a voice, deep, calm, too familiar. "Don't talk back, don't give me reason. A wife should not resist her own correction." Her breath scattered. She curled forward, making herself smaller. The world spun. Black pulsed around the edges of her vision. But she forced herself upright. She had run too far to collapse now. Someone passed close enough that she smelled whiskey and sweat. "She's hiding something," he muttered. She flinched before she could stop herself. Her right wrist throbbed. Rope burns, still tender even after turning yellow-green. Escape, if it could even be called that, had come with a price. She wished, just once, the mirror shard showed the face she used to recognize. The one men whistled at. The one Deacon Holt claimed he loved. Until the day he didn't. Her hand shook so hard the mirror rattled against her ribs. She pressed it flat to stop the sound. Boots appeared in front of her. Well-worn, dust-scuffed, planted firm. Someone stood there, not mocking, not pitying, just watching. She lifted her chin a fraction. A tall black cowboy stood before her, arms crossed, jaw tight, like the sight of her knocked something loose in him. His eyes weren't soft, just steady, measuring the kind of hurt she carried. She tensed. Men didn't look at her that way unless they wanted something. He didn't speak, neither did she. His gaze dropped to the mirror, then to the bruises on her wrist. then to her split boots, the sole nearly gone. When his voice finally came, it rolled low and even. Come. Mara froze. Her breath stalled, somewhere between disbelief and fear. He didn't reach for her, didn't offer a hand, didn't soften his tone. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a threat. Just a fact he had already decided. He crouched slightly, enough for her to see him without lifting her head. If the world won't make room for you, I will. Something cracked inside her. Quiet, painful, desperate. She clutched the mirror until blood warmed her fingers. She wanted to say no. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to disappear. But more than anything, she wanted to be seen by someone who didn't look at her like she was ruined. Boots scuffed behind them. "Leave her, Cole," a man sneered. "She ain't your problem." Cole. So that was his name. The cowboy didn't turn, didn't move. He just said, steady, final, "She's not yours to talk about." Mara's throat tightened. No one had defended her in a long, long time. Her legs trembled as she finally pushed herself upright. Pain flared down her ribs. She wobbled. Instantly, he reached out, not touching, just a hand hovering, asking permission without words. She swallowed hard and nodded. He stepped aside, giving her space. No pressure, no rush. But when she swayed again, his voice steadied her. "Come." And this time, she did. Mara followed Ezra because her legs moved before her mind could catch up. Each step jarred her ribs. The thin leather of her boots folded wrong beneath her feet, sending shocks of pain up her shins. She bit the inside of her cheek to stay steady, the taste of iron filling her mouth. Ezra walked half a step ahead, slow enough for her to keep up, firm enough that anyone watching would know she wasn't being dragged. In a place like this, men didn't need much reason to twist a story. A voice behind them rose. "She's trouble, Cole. Leave her." Mara didn't turn. She'd lived too long around men who believed their judgment outweighed her existence. Ezra didn't look back either. He didn't break stride. His voice came calm, but sharp enough to cut. "Doesn't concern you." Someone spat on the ground. "Black man thinks he owns the stray now." Mara's stomach knotted. The words weren't aimed at her, but they still scraped like glass. Her hand drifted to the burned side of her face. The skin pulled tight, remembering fire. Ezra stopped walking. Her breath snagged. Was he angry? At them? At her? Had she made a mistake? But when he turned, he faced the men. Not her. "Last warning," he said. Not shouted, not growled, just stated. A boundary drawn in dirt. Fragile, but solid enough for now. The men hesitated. Drunk courage had a way of cracking when someone refused to play their script. Ezra didn't look at any of them long enough to invite a challenge. Then he turned back to Mara. "Let's go." His voice didn't soften, didn't pity her. Somehow, that steadiness was kinder than sympathy. Mara nodded and followed again. Her shoulders curled inward, shielding the half of her face that always drew stares. But Ezra didn't stare. Not once. Not even when she stumbled. A few yards from the platform, her vision pulsed dark. Her knees buckled for a breath. She caught herself on a railing, fingers trembling. Ezra stopped immediately. "You hurt?" It wasn't suspicion, not annoyance, just assessment. Like a rancher checking if a winter-weary horse could still hold weight. She whispered, "Just tired." Tired wasn't enough. She was unraveling, held together by a mirror shard and the thin thread of not wanting to die where strangers laughed. Ezra offered his forearm, close enough to take, far enough not to touch her if she didn't want it. She stared at it. Strong. Too strong. Dangerous. Safe. She couldn't tell anymore. But when her knees wobbled again, her fingers brushed his sleeve. Only his sleeve. Not his skin. That small contact steadied her. He led her toward his horse. The animal snorted softly as she approached. She flinched. Ezra noticed. He ran a calming hand along the horse's neck before guiding her, not lifting her, just aligning her foot with the stirrup. Her burned cheek throbbed as she swung her leg over. Pain pulled at her ribs. She sucked in a sharp breath. Ezra heard it. His eyes flicked to her side. "You ride behind me. Hold the saddle, not me." She nodded, grateful he didn't ask more. He mounted in front of her, posture straight, movements smooth. She kept space between them, gripping the back of the saddle. But when the horse shifted, her body leaned forward despite herself. Her forehead hovered inches from his shoulder. Her breath brushed his back. She froze. Ezra didn't move, didn't stiffen. "I'll ride slow," he said. The horse started forward. The mirror shard pressed against her ribs. She held it tighter, afraid the jostling might make her drop the only thing she had left from her past, even though that past was something she wanted to outrun. A whisper drifted into her mind. "If you scream, no one will hear but God." Her breath fractured. She gripped the saddle horn until her knuckles ached. Ezra didn't turn around, but she sensed him noticing. His shoulders shifted, just enough to steady her balance. "You're safe behind me," he said quietly. The words landed like warm water on frost-bitten skin. Pain first, then something soft, something she hadn't felt in months. Safety. Not a promise, just a statement. And somehow that was stronger. They rode past the edge of the station where the last lantern flickered. Mara didn't look back. She knew what she'd see. Narrow eyes, men twisting stories about her, wondering what kind of woman followed a black cowboy. Let them whisper. For the first time in a long time, she had chosen a direction. Even if her legs shook, even if her heart felt like a bruised thing barely hanging on. Ezra didn't fill the silence with questions. didn't ask where she came from, or why she ran, or what burned her face or bruised her wrist. He rode quiet. And somehow, that quiet was the first mercy she'd been given in months. Her head dipped once, exhaustion sweeping through her like a heavy tide. She caught herself before leaning against him. He pretended not to notice. She closed her eyes for one breath. Only one. Ezra's voice came low, steady, grounding. "Hold on. We're leaving this place behind." She did. And they did. Mara didn't know how far they'd ridden when her fingers finally stopped throbbing from gripping the saddle. Time blurred into the steady rhythm of the horse beneath her, and the faint warmth radiating from Ezra's back, close enough to steady her balance, far enough not to crowd her. She kept her hands locked on the saddle horn, not on him, never on him. Every few minutes she adjusted her hold on the mirror shard tucked beneath her coat, afraid the ride would jostle it loose. The edge dug into her ribs, a small bite of pain that kept her awake, kept her present. Ezra didn't speak. He didn't look back. But he knew she was struggling. She felt it in the way his posture shifted. Tiny adjustments to absorb the horse's movement so she wouldn't have to. Her legs burned from holding herself upright. Her throat felt tight, every swallow scraping raw. Exhaustion softened her body in the wrong ways, like a rope fraying strand by strand. A dog barked far off, sharp, sudden. Mara flinched so violently her boot slipped from the stirrup. Her breath stuttered. Her burned cheek pulsed with heat. Memory rising uninvited. "If you run again, I'll take more than your face." Smoke, kerosene, and guilt that was never his to feel. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Ezra's voice cut through the memory. Low, steady, anchored. "You all right back there?" She forced air into her lungs. "Yes." It wasn't true, but truth felt dangerous, too revealing, too close to the life she'd clawed her way out of. Ezra didn't press. He gave a small nod she barely saw. "Tap my shoulder if you feel faint." She blinked. Why would he? No one had ever given her permission like that. Permission to need something. Her vision shimmered. She stared at her raw knuckles gripping leather. Blisters lined her palm. Marks left by the rope days before she escaped. "I won't faint," she whispered, almost defensive. Ezra replied simply, "It happens." Something in her tightened. She wasn't used to any man acknowledging weakness without weaponizing it. Silence stretched between them. Not the silence of threat, not the kind she'd lived with. This silence felt breathable, even with the pain riding her bones. As they moved farther from the station, heads turned whenever they passed other riders. Men stared at Ezra first, with that look she knew too well. Then at her, at the burned half of her face, at the distance she kept between them. From a passing wagon, a voice muttered, "White woman with a black rider, ain't right." Her stomach dropped. Heat rushed up her neck. She shrank inward, wishing she could fold small enough to disappear. Ezra spoke without turning his head. "Don't mind them." But his jaw tightened. She could see the muscle twitch. His hands stayed steady on the reins, yet tension ran through his shoulders. He'd heard worse. She didn't need to guess that. But something about her being the target, too, that landed differently. "I don't want to cause trouble for you," she managed. Ezra exhaled once. Quiet. Unreadable. "You didn't." He rode a moment in silence before adding, "People talk because they can't do much else." She swallowed. The words didn't erase the sting, but they eased something inside her. Just a fraction. Her limp worsened the longer they rode. A wrong shift of the horse sent a bolt of pain up her right leg. Sharp, like bone remembering where it had broken and healed wrong. "You hurt your leg," Ezra said. Not a question. Mara tensed. "It's fine." Ezra didn't argue, but the air shifted. He slowed the horse, made the ride gentler. Small mercies she wasn't used to. Her head dipped forward as exhaustion swept through her like a heavy tide. The world swayed, then steadied, then swayed again. "You can rest," Ezra murmured. "I'm not—" Her voice cracked. "I'm not weak." He didn't turn around. "That's not what I said." The words broke something quiet inside her. Night pressed closer, colder. Her arms shook. Her fingers slipped on the saddle horn. She gasped as her body leaned into Ezra's back. She expected him to tense, to pull away, to tell her not to touch him. But he stayed steady, as if bracing himself so she wouldn't fall. "You can lean if you need to," he said softly. He didn't make it sound like a favor, just a truth, just an option. Her forehead brushed the back of his coat, rough fabric against fever-warm skin. She closed her eyes for one long breath, listening to the slow, even rise and fall of his breathing. It calmed her in a way she didn't understand. She lifted her head again, keeping a hair's distance between them, not touching, but not collapsing either. Ezra said nothing more. He didn't need to. By the time they crested a low ridge, Mara's pulse had steadied, even if her body hadn't. She didn't know where he was taking her. She only knew this. She didn't feel hunted. Not in this moment. Not while riding behind him. And that small sense of safety. Thin, trembling, fragile, was the first she'd tasted in a very, very long time. Ezra didn't ask questions when they reached his cabin. He didn't offer explanations either. He just opened the door and stepped aside, leaving enough space for her to choose to walk in or stay outside. Choice. A thing she'd forgotten she had. Mara hesitated in the doorway. The shift from the cold air to the warm breath inside the cabin made her burned skin prickle. Her fingers rose to her cheek, tracing uneven ridges, raised scars. She waited for him to flinch. Most men did. Ezra didn't. He hung his coat on a peg, moving with the steady, efficient quiet of a man used to working alone. a man who didn't fill silence just to hear himself. "There's a bed," he said, nodding toward a simple cot against the wall. "Blankets are clean." Her stomach tightened. She recognized the way the blankets were folded. Precise. Careful. Someone else's hands used to do that. Someone gone. "I can sleep on the floor," she whispered. Ezra looked at her. Not sharply. Not with pity. Just long enough for her to feel seen instead of judged. "The bed's for guests," he said. "Floors for boots." It wasn't a smile, but something in the tone was almost gentle. Mara sank onto the edge of the cot, but kept her feet planted on the ground, ready to bolt. Her ribs ached with every breath. Her arms trembled from the strain of holding herself together. The mirror shard lay in her lap, wrapped in her palms like a fragile heartbeat. Ezra lit a lamp. The flame flickered, and for one terrible second the world tilted. Sound melted into a low roar. Orange light clawed up her throat. She smelled smoke that wasn't there. Her breath hitched, her body locked. Ezra blew the lamp out instantly. Darkness settled again. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, even though she wasn't. Even though her pulse pounded like fists on a locked door. He didn't push. Didn't move closer. He simply sat at the table across the room, giving her space to breathe. Her fingers curled around the mirror shard, pressing the smooth edge into her thumb. "You don't have to talk," he said, eyes lowered. "Just rest." Rest. The word hit harder than it should. Rest meant letting her guard down. Rest meant trusting walls that weren't hers. But her body rebelled, giving out in small, uneven releases, her shoulders sagging, her spine bending, her fingers trembling until the mirror almost slipped. Ezra noticed. "Let me see your hands." She froze. "No." "Just your hands," he repeated. She let him see, only because she didn't have the strength to hide anymore. He approached slowly, as if any sudden move might send her running. He lifted the lantern again, angling it so only her hands were in the light. Rope burns ringed her wrists, raw red, fading purple, pain carved into skin. Ezra's jaw clenched. He didn't ask who did it. He didn't need to. "I'll bring salve," he said. Mara wanted to refuse, but her voice had lost its fight. When he returned, she held her hands out automatically, like someone long accustomed to being tended by force. But Ezra didn't grab her wrists. He didn't touch her skin. He placed the jar on the cot. "You can use it yourself," he said, "if you want." If you want. Such small words. Such unexpected mercy. She dipped her fingers into the cool balm and spread it over the bruises. The ointment stung, then soothed. She bit her lip to keep from making a sound. Ezra watched from across the room, not staring, not prying, just present. Later, when she tried to lift a bucket outside, her sleeve slipped. revealing faint swollen marks around her upper arm. Marks shaped like hands. Large hands. Familiar hands. Ezra's gaze hardened, but he didn't comment. He simply took the bucket from her grip. "I'll do it." She wanted to protest, but her throat closed. Her hands shook, her vision blurred. He paused, studying her trembling fingers. "You don't owe me anything," he said. The words almost undid her. No man had ever said that. Deacon never allowed debt to go unpaid. Mara turned away, clutching the mirror shard tight enough to hurt. That night, sleep crawled up her limbs. Slow, heavy. She held the mirror to her chest, feeling the faint rattle of the letter hidden inside its backing. Ezra didn't know about that yet. No one did. Her last thought before sleep took her was simple. If he knew what was inside this mirror, he wouldn't want me here. The sun wasn't high yet when the sound of hooves broke the quiet. Mara stiffened instantly, breath catching in her throat. She'd been carrying Ezra's tools to the shed, trying to make herself useful, trying not to feel like a burden. But the moment she heard the rider, her legs locked. Ezra stepped out of the barn before she could move. His posture went sharp. Alert, protective, controlled. Not angry, just ready. Claude Bridger swung off his horse with the overeager ease of a man who liked being seen. Mara had seen men like him before. Men who laughed too loud, leaned too close, and never lost sleep over the fear they carved into others. Claude tipped his hat at Ezra. "Morning. Heard you got company." Mara tightened her grip on the rake. Her burned cheek pulsed beneath her palm. Ezra didn't answer. Claude's eyes drifted toward her. Slow, inspecting. The way someone looks at a damaged saddle before deciding whether it's worth fixing. "Well now," he drawled, "that the stray folks been whispering about." Mara felt her ribs pull tight, as if her body braced for a blow. Ezra stepped slightly in front of her. Not enough to hide her, just enough to stand between. "Claude," he said, "say what you came to say." Claude smirked. "Came for the fence hammer you borrowed. But what I found's interestin'." His eyes drifted down her arms, pausing on faint bruises. "Didn't figure you for the type to pick up scraps, Cole." Mara's breath shortened. Her fingers dug into the rake. Her heart pounded loud enough she feared he could hear it. Ezra's voice stayed flat. "Mind your mouth." Claude barked a laugh. "Just saying what Red Valley'll say when they see you keeping a burned-up white woman in your house. Folks forget your place, Cole. But I don't." There it was. The line meant to sting both of them. Heat climbed Mara's throat. Shame, fury, old fear, old words. "You're nothing without me. People laugh at women like you. No one will take your side." Her pulse thrashed. The rake slipped in her hands. Claude leaned toward Ezra. "I'm helping you, you idiot. A black man and a half-burnt runaway? They'll think she's—" Something in Mara snapped. "Times 600 and spum." Her voice cut through the air before she even knew she was speaking. "Stop." Claude froze. Ezra did too. Mara's voice shook, but it carried weight. A low, trembling anger born from months of being spoken over, spoken for, spoken about. "I'm not his burden," she said, jaw tight. "And you don't get to talk about me like I am." Claude blinked, caught off guard that she had a voice at all. "Well, look at that," he sneered. "The ghost speaks." Mara felt her knees wobble, but she didn't break eye contact. Not today. "You don't know me," she said. Her throat tightened, but she forced the words through. "You don't know a thing about what I survived. So stop talking like I belong to anyone." Ezra didn't move, didn't interrupt. He just stood there behind her, a silent wall, letting her hold the ground she'd chosen, letting her fight the battle that was hers. Claude's smirk faltered, just slightly, enough for her to see the crack. "Well," he muttered, looking away, "if she's got that much fire left, maybe she'll last longer than folks think." But the jab didn't land. Not this time. He turned to Ezra. "Hammer. Now." Ezra handed it to him without a word. Claude mounted his horse, shot Mara a last look, muttered something under his breath, and rode off. When the hoofbeats faded, Mara's legs nearly gave out. The rake slipped from her hand. Her breath broke into small, ragged pieces she couldn't gather fast enough. Ezra stepped toward her. Not touching, just close. "You all right?" She nodded, but tears burned behind her eyes. Not fear this time. Something harder. Pride tangled with grief. "I shouldn't have said anything," she whispered. "He'll spread it around." Ezra shook his head lightly. "You said what was yours to say." Her breath quivered. "People won't like it. They don't have to." He said it simply, as though the world hadn't made her pay for every time she opened her mouth. Mara looked down at her hands. They were shaking again, but not from terror. Not entirely. There'd been strength in her voice, strength she didn't know still existed. "Thank you," she murmured, though she didn't even know what part she was thanking him for. Ezra shrugged. "You stood on your own." Her chest tightened. The words meant more than he knew. A gust of wind tugged at her hair, bearing more of the scarred side of her face. She reached up instinctively to cover it. Ezra's voice came low. "You don't have to hide that here." The words nearly undid her. She pressed her hand harder to her cheek anyway. "I do." Ezra didn't argue. He just said, "Not from me." Her knees weakened again. Not from fear, but from the weight of being seen without being damned for it. And for the first time since the fire. Mara let her hand fall from her face. Just for a breath. Just long enough to feel what it might be like to live without flinching. Mara didn't plan to speak that night. Words had a way of turning on her, twisting, hurting, coming back with teeth. So she stayed seated at the edge of the cot long after Ezra finished his chores and set a tin cup of warm water on the table for her. He didn't tell her to drink. He didn't watch to make sure she did. He just left it there. Quiet mercy. Quiet distance. The room dimmed as the last of the fire sank into embers. Mara sat with her knees drawn up, both hands cupped around the mirror shard, as if holding it was the only thing keeping her from unraveling. Ezra glanced over once, saw her knuckles white, and turned away again. He didn't ask. He didn't intrude. And that was why the truth began to push up her throat. Slow, painful, like a splinter working its way out of skin. The silence stretched until it hurt. Finally, Ezra spoke. Just one question. Soft, unforced. Do you want to tell me why you ran? Her breath hitched. Her fingers tightened on the mirror until the edge cut her thumb. She stared at the blood beating. Bright, warm, real. Ezra didn't move closer, didn't lean in. You don't owe me an answer, he said. But you don't have to carry it alone, neither. That was what broke her. Not pressure, not demand. Just space. Her voice came out thin, paper dry. My husband tried to kill me. Ezra froze. His hands, steady rancher hands, tightened once before he forced them still again. Mara looked at the mirror instead of him. The cracked glass reflected half a face she barely recognized. One eye too wide, one cheek ridged with scars. He's a preacher, she whispered. Reverend Deacon Holt. Folks call him a man of God. They don't see what he is behind closed doors. Ezra didn't speak, didn't breathe too loud, didn't interrupt the unraveling. He told me I talked too much, that I asked too many questions. Her voice broke. He said my mouth brought shame, so he made sure I'd never lift my head again. Ezra's jaw tightened. Just a fraction. She saw the muscle flicker. She swallowed hard and continued. The fire wasn't an accident. It tasted like ash coming out. Times 600 mums. He locked me in the parlor, poured kerosene, struck a match, told me God would forgive him before he forgave me. Her breath fractured. Her ribs felt too tight to hold the memory. I screamed, she said softly. No one came. When the flames climbed the walls, I thought, this is how I vanish. This is how he makes sure no one listens to me ever again. Ezra rose without a sound and poured water from the kettle. He didn't hand it to her. He set it near her foot, close enough to reach, far enough she didn't feel trapped. Mara's fingers trembled. The only reason I got out was because someone opened the back door. A girl younger than me. One of the housemaids. Her breath shivered. She pushed me out the kitchen door, told me to run, said he'd kill me if I stayed. Ezra's eyes darkened, not with pity, but with something heavier. Controlled, coiled. A man cataloging every detail for a reckoning he hadn't decided on yet. She didn't get out. Those words nearly strangled her. Mara lifted the mirror shard with shaking hands. I kept this because he broke the real mirror with his fist the day I tried to leave. He said I belonged to him, that no one would believe a woman like me. Ezra's voice finally came, low, steady, carrying the weight of a man who'd buried more truth than he'd ever spoken. I believe you. Her eyes stung. She shook her head. You don't know the worst part. Ezra waited, silent, still. Mara flipped the mirror shard and pressed her thumb into the backing. A sliver of stitched leather lifted, revealing a thin, folded letter, edges scorched but legible. Ezra's breath caught, not loudly, but enough. Mara held the letter like it was burning her fingers. He wrote them, to other women. Notes, confessions, threats, things he hid in his study. Her voice shrank to a trembling whisper. He hurt them too. I found this by accident. Her hands shook violently. He'll come after me, she said. He always said if I ever told anyone, he'd finish what he started. Ezra didn't move for a long moment. Then he sat in the chair opposite her, resting his forearms on his knees, leaning forward slightly. Close enough she felt his presence like a shield. Far enough he wasn't touching her. His voice came low, even. He won't finish anything. Not while you're under my roof. Mara's breath cracked, thin and sharp. Pain and relief twisted together until she couldn't tell them apart. She closed her eyes. For the first time since the fire, she didn't feel alone with the truth. Just for a breath. Just long enough to imagine a different life. Mara didn't sleep. She lay on the cot with the mirror shard in her hands, pressing its cool surface against her burned cheek until the sting eased. Ezra had blown out the lamp hours ago, but the dark didn't bring comfort. It felt too familiar, like the moment right before flames crawled under a locked door. Her heartbeat refused to settle. Every creak, every shift of wood beneath the night wind made her muscles lock. At some point she sat up, pulled her knees to her chest, and rocked silently. The way she'd learned to quiet herself in Holt's house. A small motion, meant only to survive the next minute. Ezra was sleeping in the chair by the door. He'd said nothing about it, but he hadn't left her alone after she told him the truth. He just stayed within reach of danger and out of reach of her fear. She didn't know what hour it was when the noise came. A thud. Sharp, heavy. The door rattled once. Mara's breath shattered. The mirror slipped from her hands. She lurched backward so fast she hit the wall. Hands scrambling over the cot for something. Anything. Ezra was awake before she could even draw breath. He stood, silent, every line of his body going hard with instinct. Another thud, smaller, rolling. Ezra opened the door a crack, his body angled like a shield so nothing could breach the space behind him. Mara held her breath so tight her lungs burned. He bent down, picked something up, and the shape of his shoulders stiffened. He closed the door gently, not slamming, not alarming her further, and set a small rock on the table. A piece of paper was wrapped around it. Ezra didn't hand it to her. He didn't need to. She already knew. Her stomach folded inward, like something collapsing in fire. She forced her legs to move, forced her fingers to peel the note open even though her hands shook too hard to read smoothly. Send her back or burn again. Her blood turned cold. Her throat closed until she could barely breathe. The world tilted, the way it did when smoke filled her lungs. Ezra watched her. Not the note, not the bruises, not the fear, her. You okay? He asked quietly. She couldn't answer. Not without breaking. It's time 100 mums. Ezra reached for his coat and stepped outside. Mara scrambled up so fast she nearly tripped, panic exploding in her chest. Don't go out there alone. He could. I'm not going far, Ezra said, voice low. Just looking around. She hovered near the doorframe, trembling so violently she had to hold the wall to stay upright. From inside, she watched his silhouette move. Steady, unhurried, every step deliberate. He paused by the corral, kneeled, pressed his fingers to the dirt. Her breath froze again. Footprints. She knew he'd found footprints. When Ezra returned, his face was locked. Calm, cold, certain. There were 3, he said. One kept to the shadows. One circled the horses. One came to the door. Mara's nails dug into her palms. She tasted metal on her tongue. This is because of me, she whispered. If I leave, right now, tonight, you won't. Ezra, you don't need to burn for something that ain't. He cut her off, not sharply, not unkindly, just firmly. No. Ezra, no, he repeated. I'm not letting you walk into the dark with men like that behind you. She shook her head, panic rising like a tide. I can't let them hurt you. I can't. I already cost someone their life. I won't. Ezra stepped one pace closer. Not enough to touch her. Enough for her to feel the solidity of him. Listen to me. His voice was deep, quiet, carrying the calm of a man who had weathered storms far worse than tonight. No more running. She blinked, tears blurring her sight. He said it again, slower. Not here. Her legs folded. She sank onto the edge of the cot, hands gripping the blankets so tightly the fabric twisted. I don't know how to stay, she whispered. Every time I stop moving, he finds me. Ezra crouched a short distance away, arms resting loosely on his knees. His presence filled the space, without crowding her. He won't find you here. A pause. I won't let him. Mara's breath hitched. You don't know what he's capable of. Ezra's jaw tightened, the muscle ticking once. Time 800. I've seen men like him, he said. Men who think God wrote their name on every woman's skin. Her pulse hammered. Ezra looked at the note again, then at her. He wants you scared, Ezra said, and he wants me to push you out. I ain't giving him either. Mara covered her mouth as a sob broke loose, shaking through her palm. Ezra didn't reach for her, didn't pull her close, didn't touch the trembling in her shoulders. He just sat there, steady as a rooted post, until her breathing slowed and her tears ran out. When she finally lifted her head, he gave a small nod, as if confirming something he'd already decided long before the note hit the door. "We'll deal with him," he said. "Together." The word "together" settled into her chest like something warm pressed against cold skin. For the first time since the fire, the terror didn't consume everything. It left a sliver of space, thin but there, space where her future might live. Mara barely slept the night before. Fear clung to her ribs in a way sleep couldn't loosen. But at dawn, when Ezra saddled the horse and held the reins out, she understood what he wasn't saying. Running was over. Hiding was over. Truth had a destination now. Red Valley. She climbed up behind him, hands gripping the saddle. Not him. She kept her head low, the burned side turned away from the morning light. But nothing could hide the tremor running through her body. Ezra didn't look back. He just said quietly, "If it gets too much, tap my shoulder." Those words stayed with her the entire ride. By the time they reached the sheriff's office, she'd rehearsed 10 versions of what she meant to say, each one burning out before reaching her tongue. But she didn't expect what waited outside. A crowd. Too many faces. Too many eyes. Eyes that judged before they listened. Eyes that followed Ezra with the kind of stare Mara had learned to fear long before she ever feared fire. And then she saw him, standing near the well, surrounded, admired, untouched. Deacon Holt. Spotless clothes, hair combed, Bible tucked neatly beneath his arm, like a badge of righteousness. He looked nothing like the man who had pressed her face toward the flames. A woman touched his arm. "Reverend, we prayed for you." He nodded solemnly, as if he deserved prayer, as if he were the victim. Mara felt her stomach twist. Her grip on the saddle tightened until her knuckles burned white. Ezra felt her freeze and spoke under his breath. Steady. Grounded. "He doesn't own the ground you walk on." But it didn't feel that way. Not when Deacon's eyes finally found her. He smiled first. A gentle smile. A holy smile. Then he spoke loud enough for the crowd to hear. "There she is, the wife who ran from God and from me." A ripple moved through the crowd. Mara's pulse spiked. Her throat closed. Ezra shifted, blocking the worst of the stares, but not enough to erase them. "She left my house," Deacon continued, "to follow a black man, then blamed me for the fire she set herself." Gasps, whispers, judgment piling up fast and suffocating. Ezra didn't move, didn't react. He stood like a held breath, like he was letting Mara decide what happened now, not him. Deacon stepped closer, voice dripping sweetness. "Come home, Mara. Confess. God forgives even the broken." Her knees shook so violently she thought she'd collapse. But she didn't reach for Ezra. She reached into her coat, fingers brushing the mirror shard, the only piece of truth she had left. Ezra's voice came low, steady as bedrock. You don't have to speak if you're not ready. But she was ready. Terror, anger. Months of swallowed silence surged to the surface. Before she could second-guess the impulse, Mara stepped out from behind Ezra. The crowd parted. Eyes widened. Her voice wavered, but didn't break. Look at me. Deacon froze. The crowd hushed. This, she said, lifting the mirror shard, is what he did to me. Her breath shook. Her hands trembled. But her voice held. He locked me in a burning room, told me it was God's will, said no one would believe a woman like me. Somewhere in the crowd, someone muttered, lies. But another voice broke through, small, shaking, from a girl near the back. He hurt me too. Deacon stiffened. Mara's heart slammed against her ribs. The girl pushed forward, tears streaking her cheeks. He touched me, made me keep quiet, said God wanted it. A gasp tore through the crowd. Deacon's mask slipped. Rage flashing, sharp and unfiltered. You dare! Ezra stepped forward, calm, immovable. Let her speak. A man shouted, Reverend, is it true? A woman whispered, My daughter worked in his house. A boy murmured, I saw him in the barn with... The world tilted. Suddenly Deacon wasn't the holy man. He was cornered prey. He spat toward Ezra. This is your doing. Ezra's face didn't change. That girl nearly died because of you, and you ain't walking away from this. The sheriff appeared, pushing through the gathering, jaw set grim. Everyone quiet, he barked. We're hearing this out proper. Deacon snarled. You'll regret this, all of you. But the crowd's certainty had cracked. Their faith had shaken. And for the first time, Mara felt a shift. Small, trembling, but real. Her legs still shook, but she didn't hide behind Ezra when the sheriff motioned for them to step inside. She walked, on her own feet, head unbowed. Ezra followed behind her. One step back, close enough to catch her if she fell, far enough to let her lead the way. Mara barely slept after Red Valley. Not even when the sheriff locked Deacon away. Not even when Ezra helped her mount the horse and murmured, It's over for today. But men like Deacon didn't stop just because a badge said so. She knew that in her bones, deep, aching knowledge carved by fire. They rode until the sun dipped low. Ezra slowed near a thin line of running water. Mara slid off the horse, legs trembling from fear more than the long day's ride. She cupped her hands beneath the cool stream, splashing her face, letting the water hide the shaking. Ezra crouched nearby, rinsing blood from a small cut on his knuckle. Deacon had tried to shove him earlier, and Ezra had stepped between her and that moment of violence before she even processed it. You hungry? He asked, without looking up. No, she whispered. It wasn't true, but her stomach was too knotted to hold food. Ezra stood, brushing water from his hands. We'll camp here a bit. Head home after dark lifts. She nodded, hugging her arms around herself. Gentle wind, running water, Ezra's steady breathing. It should have felt safe. Until it didn't. A twig snapped, sharp, deliberate. Too close. Ezra's hand went to his gun. But a figure surged behind him. A fist cracked across his jaw. He fell to his knees before he could draw. Ezra! Mara lunged forward, but someone grabbed her from behind, an arm crushing across her chest, breath sour against her ear. Well, well, a voice hissed, the runaway wife. Her whole body seized, every muscle locked, her breath died in her throat. Deacon. He stepped into view, face twisted with something wild. Holy fury stripped of its mask. Two other men came from behind the trees. Ezra tried to rise, but one of them kicked him hard in the ribs. He dropped again, gritting out a breath. Deacon crouched near him, smiling cruel. God does provide, he murmured. He handed her right back to me. Mara shook in the iron grip holding her. Sweat stung her burned cheek. Her ears rang so loudly she almost didn't hear Deacon's next words. Tie him. Time 900 spon. Ezra fought when the rope looped his wrists, but two men forced him down. He caught Mara's eyes once, steady, grounding, as if saying, hold on. Don't, she whispered to the man behind her. Please, don't hurt him. Deacon turned, jaw clenching. You think I care what a ruined woman asks? Her ribs tightened. Memories of fire clawed her spine. The man holding her shifted his grip, pinning her arms painfully. Reverend, want her gagged? Deacon grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. She's not worth gagging. She's weak. She'll follow if she knows what's coming. Ezra growled through the pain. Don't touch her. Deacon smirked. What will you do, pray for her? One of the men laughed. Deacon yanked Mara forward by the arm. She belongs to me. Those 4 words cracked something inside her. Not fear. Not just fear, but a rage buried under ash. She swallowed hard. Her voice came out barely audible. She doesn't. Deacon tightened his grip. I burned you once, Mara. I can do it right this time. Her body went still, completely still. And something old, older than her pain, rose inside her. Not strength, instinct. The moment Deacon turned to tell the men to drag Ezra, she twisted, fast, sharp, desperate. Her elbow slammed into the ribs of the pawn holding her. He gasped, loosening his grip. She lunged for his holster. Fingers closed around cold metal. Deacon spun. No! The world narrowed to a single point of fear so sharp, it steadied her hand. Ezra shouted, Mara! Gunfire cracked the air. Her arms jerked. Her ears rang. The gun kicked hard against her palm. Deacon staggered backward, hand flying to his shoulder. Blood seeped through his shirt. Dark, thick, undeniable. The 2 men froze long enough for Ezra to surge upward, slamming his shoulder into one of them. The rope burned his wrists, but he didn't stop until the man hit the ground. The second attacker swung. Ezra spun, using his bound hands like a weight. cracking them across the man's jaw. Both men fell. Mara stood shaking violently, gun still pointed, though her fingers could barely hold it. Tears blurred her sight. Her breath came in broken gasps. Ezra kicked a fallen gun aside, then tore the rope from his wrists and moved straight toward her. "Mara," he said softly, but she couldn't hear him. Not over the fire in her head, not over the memory of clawing at a locked door. Deacon glared at her, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "You'll burn for this," he spat. Ezra stepped between them, solid, unyielding. "No," he said, "she won't." Mara's grip loosened. The gun slipped into Ezra's hands. Her knees buckled. Ezra caught her before she hit the ground. For a moment she shook against him. Full-body tremors, as if every bit of fear trapped in her bones was trying to escape at once. "I thought he'd—" She couldn't finish. Ezra held her tighter. "Not while I'm breathing." But she knew the truth. This time, she hadn't been saved by him. She saved herself. And that changed everything. The courthouse felt colder than the night Deacon tried to drag her away. Colder than the stream. Colder than the fire years ago. Mara stood behind Ezra as they walked in. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling, so she curled them into fists and tucked them against her skirt. Ezra didn't touch her. Not here. Not now. But he walked close enough for her to feel the steadiness rolling off him. The room buzzed with whispers. "That's her. The burned woman. The preacher's wife. Wasn't she dead? Why's she standin' with a black rancher?" Mara kept her head down. She didn't have the strength yet to face all the eyes at once. Sheriff Avery Webb looked tired already, as if he knew exactly how ugly this would get. He nodded at Ezra, then at Mara and said, "Let's get this over with." Deacon Holt was brought forward in irons. He walked like he'd been inconvenienced, like the world had made a mistake, like the restraints were just a temporary misunderstanding. When his eyes found Mara, they didn't widen, didn't burn with anger. No, worse. They smiled, a calm, holy, patient smile. "Mara," he said gently, like greeting a child who'd wandered off. "You look tired." Her stomach twisted so violently she thought she'd be sick. Ezra stepped forward half a pace, then caught himself. Mara shook her head, small and certain. She needed to stand on her own feet now. Judge Farnham rapped the gavel. "We begin." The sheriff recounted the ambush, Ezra's bruises, the two men arrested beside Deacon, the footprints, the blood on the rocks, enough to make anyone uneasy. But as soon as Deacon's lawyer rose, a polished man with soft hands and colder eyes, the room shifted. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are dealing with a troubled woman." He gestured toward Mara without looking at her, as if she were an object someone had forgotten to move. A woman traumatized, confused, possibly manipulated by a man with motives of his own. Every gaze flicked to Ezra. Ezra didn't move, didn't blink, didn't offer them 1 inch of apology. "And what motives would that be?" the judge asked. The lawyer smiled thinly. A lonely black rancher, living far from town, taken in a white woman with no family, no reputation, and a history of running. The murmurs turned vicious. Mara flinched. Ezra didn't. Deacon watched it all like a sermon he'd written himself. He claims she was abused, the lawyer said. But what proof? Burned scars, stories, tears. He stepped closer to Mara. Miss Lane, did you have relations with Mr. Cole before accusing your husband of attempted murder? Mara blinked. Mind emptied. Ezra inhaled sharply. No, she whispered. Are you aware people saw you holding on to him like a lover? I was holding on, she said, because I didn't want to fall. Convenient. He paced. Tell me, Miss Lane, did you burn the house yourself to free yourself from a marriage you regretted? Her throat closed. Her vision blurred. Her fingers dug into the stand as memories slammed back. The locked door, the match, the laughter behind it. No, she whispered. I didn't burn anything. But you carry a shard of glass from that burned house everywhere you go. A strange souvenir. Mara's breath caught. Ezra straightened. The sheriff stiffened. The judge leaned forward. The lawyer smirked. Maybe, Miss Lane. Maybe you're the one hiding something. Mara closed her eyes. And then a voice returned, soft and strong from somewhere deep. Don't bow to him, girl. A woman who survives fire don't owe anyone her shame. She exhaled, eyes opened. For the first time since stepping inside, she lifted her head. He burned my face, she said. Not my truth. Silence crashed through the room. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the charred shard, held it high. This wasn't a souvenir, she whispered. It was a hiding place. With shaking fingers, she slid her thumb along the inner edge, revealing a folded piece of paper wedged in the split frame. She handed it to the judge. My husband told people I fell asleep with a lamp. But this letter, this is from a girl who worked in his house. She wrote about the things he did. She died in that fire. I didn't. Gasps. A woman sobbed. Someone whispered a prayer. Deacon's smile cracked. Just once, like something rotten splitting open. Judge Farnham's face darkened as he read the letter. Sheriff Webb stepped forward with statements from the other girls who had spoken in Red Valley. Suddenly, the tide shifted. The lawyer stuttered. The murmurs turned accusing. People leaned away from Deacon as if his skin were poison. Mara looked at him. He stared back with hatred so cold it almost calmed her. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply said, "You don't own me." Behind her, Ezra's breath shook. Just once. But she heard it. For the first time since the fire, breathing didn't feel like something she stole. It felt earned. The courthouse emptied for deliberation, leaving the hallway thick with breath and judgment. Mara stood against the wall, feeling the wood press cold and steady into her spine. She didn't trust her legs to hold her without it. Ezra stayed a step away. Close, but not close enough to make her feel like she was being guarded. He knew the difference. He always knew the difference. "You did more than enough," he said softly. Mara shook her head. "I didn't do it for them." Ezra studied her face for a long, quiet beat. "I know." A door creaked open. The jury filed in, expressions giving nothing away. Sheriff Webb stepped forward. "All rise." People stood. Chairs scraped. Breath held. Mara's pulse thudded in her throat, heavy enough to choke her. Judge Farnham cleared his voice. "We have reached a verdict." Deacon Holt was brought in, irons clinking like hymn bells dragged through mud. He walked like a man approaching a Sunday service, calm, sanctimonious, righteous. His eyes drifted to Mara and softened in that same way that once kept her shackled, gentle, pitying, poisonous. The judge unfolded the paper. On the charges of arson, attempted murder, and abuse. We find the defendant, Deacon Holt, guilty on all counts. For a second, the air simply stopped. No gasps, no cheering, just a stunned silence, heavy as wet earth. Then a murmur rose. "Lord, have mercy." "About time. My sister told me he wasn't right." Deacon didn't flinch. Not once. He only turned his head toward Mara. Even condemned, even in chains, he wore the same expression he used when he wanted her to bend. "She belongs to me," he said loudly, clear enough for every soul to hear. The words hit like an open-handed slap. For years, those 4 words had followed her through fire, through hunger, through nights so hollow she wished the flames had taken everything. Not now. Mara stepped forward before Ezra could move. She faced Deacon full on. Scars, trembling breath, pounding heart, and all. The room watched, waiting to see if she would break or bow. She did neither. Her voice came quiet, but it carried. "I don't belong to anyone." The murmur died instantly. Deacon's face twitched, just enough to see the fracture. The sheriff hauled him away. She didn't look away. Not until he disappeared behind the iron-barred door. Only then did her knees soften. Not from fear, but from something else. Something lighter. Something like release. Ezra stepped closer, not touching, just present. "You said what needed saying." But Mara wasn't sure what she felt. Victory didn't live in her chest, nor triumph, nor any relief big enough to breathe through. It was something smaller, like a thread being cut, freeing a knot that had lived too long inside her. "I thought it would feel different," she whispered. Ezra nodded. "Sometimes freedom is quiet." She let out a slow, shaky breath. "Then why am I still scared?" "Because it's new," Ezra said, "and because men like him never leave cleanly." Sheriff Webb approached, hat in hand. "He'll hang in 2 days. We'll keep him locked tight until then." He hesitated. "You've done this town a service, Miss Lane." Mara didn't know how to answer. Wasn't sure she wanted the gratitude of people who'd avoided her eyes for weeks. Webb cleared his throat. You and Cole should head back to the ranch. I'll need you both for the final paperwork. But go rest. You've earned it. Ezra tipped his head. Thank you, Sheriff. As they left the courthouse, the crowd parted. Some looked away, ashamed. Some nodded. A few women touched Mara's sleeve. Light, gentle, silent. One whispered, "You saved more than yourself." The words nearly unmade her. Ezra helped her onto the horse. Hands careful, slow, letting her guide the moment. "You want to go home?" he asked. She looked at him. Really looked. His jaw bruised from the ambush. His hands scraped. His eyes tired but steady. Home. The thought was terrifying, but not bad. She nodded. They rode in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Mara leaned slightly forward, not from fear, this time, but exhaustion. Ezra kept the pace easy, as if he knew her bones couldn't take much more. Halfway back, she finally spoke. "Ezra?" "Yeah." "When he said I belonged to him," her voice cracked, "I didn't feel small this time." Ezra glanced back, just enough for her to see the softness in his eyes. "That's because you don't." Something warm fluttered in her chest. Strange, fragile, alive. She pressed a hand over her heart, surprised it didn't hurt to breathe. For the first time since she'd woken in the ashes of her old life, the road ahead didn't look like a punishment. It looked like a beginning. And she wasn't walking it alone. A year didn't erase the scars, but it softened the places they used to bleed. Coal Ridge Ranch wasn't louder now, just steadier. A place where breath didn't feel stolen. A place where Mara could exist without waiting for footsteps behind a door. Most mornings she woke before Ezra. She'd sit on the edge of the bed, touch the healed ridges along her cheek, and feel no panic, just memory. Some mornings, she even forgot to hide the left side of her face when pulling on her shawl. Ezra chopped wood outside, boots marking the same quiet path he'd walked long before she came. She stepped onto the porch, drawn by the sound. Ezra turned toward her with something tucked behind his back. "You're up early," he said. "So are you." He hesitated. Ezra never hesitated, then brought the object forward. A mirror. Small, wooden framed, carved by hand. The glass caught a sliver of dawn. "I know mirrors haven't been easy for you," he said. "But I thought maybe you needed one that wasn't born from hurt." Her breath trembled. "You made this?" "Every piece." Mara held it carefully, afraid her shaking might break it. The reflection staring back wasn't the fire-lit horror she remembered. Just a woman. Tired, scarred, alive. She went inside and opened a small metal box. Wrapped in cloth lay the charred shard of glass she'd carried from the ruins, the one that once hid the letter that saved her. Blackened, splintered, heavy with everything she had survived. Ezra leaned against the doorway, waiting for her choice. She placed the burned shard beside the new mirror. two lives, side by side. No shame in either, just truth. "He burned my face," she whispered, "but he doesn't get to decide what I see when I look at myself." Ezra stepped close enough for warmth to settle over her shoulders. "You're home," he said. She nodded. "I am." Children arrived soon after, boots clattering, voices bright, coming for their reading lessons. They gathered under the cottonwood tree, struggling with letters while Mara corrected them gently. She caught her reflection again through the open window. For the first time, she didn't look away. Her scars didn't shrink, but their power vanished. Later that night, she wrote in the journal Ezra had given her months ago. One final line. "He burned my face, but not my future. My future is mine to choose." Ezra slid an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, letting the quiet settle. No flames, no footsteps coming for her. No chains she had to snap alone. Just peace, earned by truth, held by choice. On the shelf, the two mirrors rested side by side. One for the life that tried to end her, one for the life she claimed anyway. As the dust settles on Mara and Ezra's long road to peace, we're reminded that healing doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in small steps, quiet mornings, gentle choices. It comes in the steady hands of someone who stays, and in the courage it takes to believe you deserve a second chance. Their journey wasn't easy, but that's what makes it meaningful. Scars, after all, are not signs of weakness. They're proof that we lived through something and kept going. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. What part resonated most? Which moment reminded you of someone you once knew, or of a time in your own life when you had to stand up, hold on, or start over? Your stories matter here. Your wisdom matters. Before you go, please consider giving this video a like. It helps more folks discover these Western tales of hope and redemption. And if you'd like to spend more evenings with us, hearing stories of courage, compassion, and second chances, feel free to subscribe. Don't forget to leave a comment below. I read every single one. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I'll see you in the next story.